welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now, I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Poor Cardinal, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Martins Neto used to say he was the happiest man alive, and everyone agreed. No one had ever seen him sad, or even slightly down. Even as he grew older, he remained the highlight of every dinner party, a walking collection of spicy jokes, cheerful stories, and sharp, bold remarks. But more than just making others laugh, his joy came from deep within, from his blood and his way of life. Shortly before he died in 1878, he told a close friend who envied his cheerful spirit, "I am happy, very happy. But if I told you that this very happiness brought me great pain, you wouldn't believe me." He stopped talking, walked around twice, then returned to his friend and said, "I'll tell you a secret, like I'm confessing to a priest. You remember that I was one of the judges in the famous false letters trial of João da Cruz in 1851. There had been many important cases during that jury session, and Martins Neto judged them all with his usual strictness. He sentenced many people, and he never regretted it. The day before João da Cruz's trial began, Martins Neto met with a certain Captain José Leandro, who lived on Rua da Carioca. They talked about the trial, the letters, and many other small details, most of which he had now forgotten. In the end, they talked about João da Cruz himself. Captain José Leandro said he had known João since they were boys. José Leandro's father was a Portuguese general who came to Brazil with the king in 1808, and married a lady from Cantagalo not long after. When José Leandro was a child, João da Cruz showed up at their house on Rua de Matacavalos. José Leandro remembered how João tried to impress and flatter his family. He also remembered that by the end of 1816, João da Cruz was in terrible shape, poor, wearing the same old yellowed clothes, barely patched together. The day had settled into that kind of quiet that only old houses seem to hold. The kind that makes you feel like time itself has paused to catch its breath. I was sitting with Dona Luisa, who had a way of making even silence feel polite, when João da Cruz came in like a storm. He was out of breath, eyes wide, and shouting before he even crossed the threshold. "Poor Cardinal, poor Cardinal," he cried, hands trembling. "Ah, my lady Dona Luisa, what a terrible tragedy. Poor Cardinal." Dona Luisa stood up quickly, startled. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Is this about the general?" "No, no," João da Cruz replied, shaking his head. "It has nothing to do with your honorable husband. I'm talking about the Cardinal. Poor Cardinal." "But which Cardinal?" she asked, confused. João da Cruz sat down, heavy with sorrow, rubbing his eyes with a ragged handkerchief. Dona Luisa respected his grief. It looked real enough deep and painful. So she stood quietly, waiting for him to explain. But before he could say more, they heard the clatter of a sword in the hallway. The general had arrived. Moments later, he stepped into the room. "Did you hear?" he said to his wife. "The nuncio, Cardinal Caleppi, has passed away. He died of a stroke." Dona Luisa looked from her husband to João da Cruz, stunned. He came in, she said, still surprised. Just moments ago, completely overwhelmed by the news of the cardinal's death. I hadn't even thought of the nuncio. If I had said the nuncio had died, João da Cruz added, perhaps I would have been understood. But I was beside myself. I admit, I was so shaken that I even sat down before you did, which was terribly rude. But grief does strange things to a man. I just heard the news near Lagoa da Centilla. I was stunned. I walked here stunned. The general sat down, clearly surprised by the whole scene. He asked João Cruz to sit as well, then looked at him curiously. And tell me, the general asked, since when do you know the cardinal? And were you really so close to him? João da Cruz didn't answer right away. He first nodded, a quiet gesture full of emotion, as if remembering something dear and distant. Then he wiped his eyes with a rag. Dona Luisa, sitting beside her husband, watched the poor man with sympathy. At last he admitted he had known the great cardinal through favors received in Lisbon. He had only looked for him twice here, once when he arrived in 1814, and again when the cardinal had fallen ill. He never spoke of it to the honorable general before, because the humiliations he went through that brought him into the presence of the cardinal, whom God rest, were bitter and painful. Well, said the general, but now I will tell everything, if your excellency so commands, João da Cruz replied. After wiping his red eyes, he continued. It was in Lisbon, around 1806. I had just arrived from Genoa, and after skipping over an Italian grammar book, I decided to teach the language. I confess I knew very little of it, but I learned as I taught. Then, I was accused of being a French spy and thrown in jail. Imagine, Your Excellency, how deeply that insult hurt me. But happily, after a few days, the accusation was proven false, and I was released. Happy with the justice done, I was surprised by how quickly it happened. Only later did I learn that the cardinal had been the reason for my release. I rushed to thank him, but His Eminence denied it, not once, but twice. Finally, he admitted the truth. As soon as he heard the accusation was false, he went straight to the minister and demanded my release, and he got it. Why, I asked, did Your Eminence do such a kind thing for me? He told me it was only because he had heard I was teaching Italian. Only for that reason, and without even knowing Mehe had taken an interest in me. Ah, I understand perfectly, said the general. That was what connected me to him, João da Cruz said. He did me other favors later, and when I confessed to him that I barely knew Italian, and that I had started teaching it just to spread the love for such a beautiful language, he offered to give me some lessons himself. But then came the events of 1808. The court moved to Brazil, and the cardinal, right before boarding the ship, begged me to come along. I refused, telling him I planned to join the army that would drive out the treacherous invader. Bravo, said the general. His Eminence, unable to change my mind, said goodbye with many tears, and gave me a copy of an Italian poem, annotated by his own holy hands, as a keepsake. That book was later stolen from me by one of Napoleon's soldiers, a miserable man. Why would he want it? Probably to sell it. What value could such a heretic place on an object of such worth? João da Cruz spoke harsh words about the soldier and Napoleon, calling them highway thieves without hesitation. After that scolding, he brought the cloth to his eyes, clearly upset. The general tried to comfort him. "Death is the path we all must take," the general said gently. Besides, the nuncio was already in his 70s. "Still, I admire your feelings. They come from a good heart." "Thank you very much," João da Cruz replied. "You can be sure that if you had said otherwise, I would have doubted my own sorrow. And I value your advice so much that I wanted to ask, do you think it would seem like an act if I wore mourning for such a great man?" "I don't think it would." "You don't? Then I will. I won't tell anyone the reason, not like I did here, because it's just for his soul, which I hope will thank me. Poor Cardinal. He'll think about it." As the general stood up and walked inside, João da Cruz seemed a bit unsure of what to do next. Then José Leandro's mother invited him to stay for dinner. "I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Let me see if I can manage it," he said, pausing between sighs, glancing at his clothes. But Donna Luisa took her son by the hand and left the room. João da Cruz left the house and stepped into the hallway. He paused there, looking around, but didn't see the doorman. The man was in the backyard, and later told the family what he had seen. João made a desperate gesture and said, "These people are even more lifeless than the cardinal himself." José Leandro wanted to go to the funeral right away. He asked his father to take him. His father told his wife that the king had ordered full honors for the deceased. The body, carefully preserved, would stay at home for 3 days. During that time, masses and prayers would be said in front of it. The burial would take place at Santo Antonio Church. That was all anyone could talk about. But that same night, the general fell ill. By early morning, he had been bled, a common treatment back then. His condition got worse. It was now impossible to take the boy to the funeral. The mother could not leave her husband's side. José Leandro, who had always been spoiled and given whatever he wanted, insisted on going. He said he could go with a slave if needed. But his mother knew that a slave wouldn't be able to find a good spot for him in the church. So she asked João da Cruz to do her a favor and take the boy to Santo Antonio. "A favor?" João replied. "Call it a duty, madam. But your excellency knows that I cannot." The general agreed. He understood that João would feel forced to attend the burial of a dear friend who had left so many memories behind. Then, turning to the boy, he promised to take him to the St. Sebastian parade instead. He said it was very beautiful, and something the boy had never seen. José Leandro held back his tears. He would miss one thing, but maybe get another. João da Cruz, however, quickly painted a vivid picture of the funeral. He said it would be as grand, or even grander than the Queen Donna Maria's funeral the year before. He talked about 5 bishops, many monks, torches, royal carriages, and soldiers, something truly unforgettable. The boy begged João da Cruz to take him. João didn't refuse. After all, he couldn't say no to such a respected person. And the body of a great friend was not something to avoid. On the contrary, this final farewell would give strength to a brave heart. "All right," said the general, "if there are no doubts." The boy had to admit he needed permission to say yes, but there was always a doubt. A sad, quiet doubt. Something that embarrassed him deeply. Don't ask what it was. He couldn't talk about it without crying. If the general insisted, he'd just shut up and let those poor, worn-out pants speak for themselves. They had once been black, sure, but time had taken its toll. Everything had. Even the holes in his shoes. Was that mourning clothes? Was that the kind of mourning fit for a prince of the church? No, no. Numero the boy should wait for the procession, go with his illustrious father. Let the funeral rites go on, even if they were very loud. Loud? The boy interrupted. And then, crying and crying, he begged again to go. His father, still in bed, was tossing and turning, not sure what to do. He was known to be stingy, they said, and hated spending a few coins. They argued, father and son, back and forth until finally, in despair, the father said, "Joanna Cruz," he told the servant, "talk to this lady about the mourning clothes. Take her my note to the tailor and the shoemaker. Does he need a hat too? There must be one somewhere around the house. Let her give it to him. Just go and leave me in peace." That's how he got his new outfit, even if it was black. And black or not, new was new. Years later, Jose Leandro still remembered the funeral when he told me this story. He could picture Joanna Cruz's proud figure, watching and listening to everything like a stranger, with great interest. Jose told him the names of the ceremonies, the objects, the bishops. There were 5 or 6 of them. But he only remembered the ones from Angola and Pernambuco and the ones from the religious orders, and a few canons too. Now and then, he'd stretch his arm and look at himself in it. As time passed, he even became cheerful. Outside, going down the hill, he kept talking about the beautiful party and reciting big parts of the sermon. At Largo da Carioca, they got into the carriage that was waiting for them. But when they reached the house, João Cruz put on his sad glasses again. He got out unsteady, walked in slowly, and disappeared inside. I still remember how funny I found that little story. Jose Leandro told it well, sure. But the whole thing struck me as incredibly amusing. I laughed so hard I couldn't stop, repeating the punchline that had made the other man spill his laundry. Poor Cardinal. Juve probably figured out by now that had never even spoken to the nuncio. Not once. If he ever saw him, it was either in church or from inside a carriage. But he lied with such confidence, such charm and quick wit, his tale so cleverly put together, using every little detail just right, that it was hard not to fall for the trick. And honestly, the whole thing was funny. Even now, after all these years, I still find it quite sharp. But let me continue. Here is something I'd only ever tell God or you. The next day, I went to the jury trial. The story still fresh in my mind. I'd even dreamed about it, and woke up laughing. I arrived just in time and was quickly chosen to sit on the jury. When I saw the defendant, I couldn't help but smile. There he was, just as I'd imagined him on the day the nuncio died. A slightly tilted head, tired, downcast eyes, the face of a sly man. He didn't look old, even though he must have lived many wild years. I guessed he was somewhere in his mid-60s, maybe close to 70. His upper lip was clean-shaven, and the rest of his beard, thin and gray, gave his face a serious, almost solemn look. Every now and then he took a pinch of snuff. I noticed right away that the snuff box was made of gold. The interrogation lasted about 40 minutes. João Cruz answered clearly and firmly. He denied forging the documents and explained away some contradictions they accused him of. I admit, I listened with real interest, without any dislike. Every so often, the Cardinal story would pop into my head, adding a touch of humor to the moment. I pictured him in Mata on that very day, standing in front of the general, telling those wild stories from Lisbon, making excuses, pretending to cry, all the way to the final twist. Oh, he was clever. No doubt about it, and entertaining too. I sat through the trial, but I didn't really follow the full record. I listened to a few pages at the beginning, then told myself the documents were too long and the reading too boring. But that wasn't really it. The truth was, the defendant's story was starting to make me uncomfortable. To distract myself, I started looking around the room studying the lawyer's robe. The faces of my fellow council members, the clerk's wild hair, the judge's sideburns, and finally, the emperor's portrait hanging on the wall. That last one really caught my attention. I began thinking about the coronation celebrations, both the public ones and the private events. I remembered attending a banquet where I'd heard two beautiful odes recited. I tried to remember them now, but couldn't get the full verses. I struggled to piece them together, pulling out a line here and there, most of them broken or incomplete. And before I knew it, the reading was over. Next came the prosecution's argument. I found myself torn, sometimes agreeing, sometimes not. Then the defense spoke, and my mind settled a bit. Something inside me shifted. I felt a small grain of sympathy, or maybe something else, pulling me toward João de Cruz's side. I couldn't look at him without smiling. Once, to keep from laughing out loud, I faked a cough into my handkerchief. The judge spoke for just over 15 minutes. Then the documents were handed to the council, and we left the room. In the private chamber, the debate stretched on, complicated and long, but not nearly as much as the battle inside me. That was where the real decision had to be made. Justice told me to convict. Sympathy begged me to set him free. And then, deep inside, the devil, because it could only be him, whispered, "Poor Cardinal. Oh, my Lady Donna Luisa. What a terrible tragedy. Poor Cardinal." And my conscience laughed. Yes, it actually laughed. It no longer denied the crime, but it placed shame and long imprisonment on the other side of the scale. Then it added the man's agaches many, tired years. In the end, the votes were counted. 6 said guilty. 6 said not guilty. It came down to the deciding vote, the vote of Minerva. And the defendant was acquitted. I walked out feeling pleased with myself. If I had voted against him, I would have tipped the scales, and his conviction would have been certain. I left cheerful, and I told no one about the struggle inside me. Only now am I telling you. But the Cardinal story quickly spread far and wide. It was that silly little trick from 1817, so light-hearted and harmless, that won my sympathy and my vote for the defendant in 1851, not because it was harmless, but because it was amusing. Years have passed since then, and though I remain the happiest man of the century, I still carry this one dark spot of sadness within me. Who knows? Perhaps this mistake of mine will condemn me in the next world. All of this is part of life's great mysteries, replied Martins Neto's closest friend. Events and moments are tied together by invisible threads. Imagine this, if João de Cruz had not played that trick on the general back in 1817. He would not have been acquitted by your vote in 1851. You would have no hint of guilt, and I would not be telling the story. Poor Cardinal.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.